Hey friends, what up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chavdal, Daf 24, Masechta Rosh Hashanah. Friends, today we're talking about Kiddush HaChodesh and the moon and stuff. So yesterday we learned at the end of the Daf a Mishnah about how exactly they would interrogate and question the witnesses who came to testify about the new moon. So we're going to see the Gemara for that Mishnah. Then we're going to talk about what exactly happens when they get the information that they need, and it's time to Mekadesh the Chodesh. And then we'll have, I guess, sort of a interesting discussion, of course, if you're interested in it, about these sort of images that Rabbi Gamliel had of the moon. So that's what we're going to talk about. Friends, let's do it. So we had said in the Mishnah yesterday that if, like, they say that the moon was in front of the sun, was like before the sun, so then immediately their testimony is invalid, because Memele, the moon is going to be sort of after the sun, because like that's the way it kind of goes, right? Like the moon blocks the sun, and then when the new moon starts, like when the new month starts, so then it kind of gets after the sun. Zok the Gemara, Hainu lifnei achama, hainu litzvona. So the Mishnah had said two in Yonim. The Mishnah had said two things. One is that if they say that it's before the sun, so it's no good, and also that if it's to the north of the sun, it's no good. Now, before the sun and to the north of the sun are the same thing. So, Hainu lifnei achama, hainu litzvona, hainu lachar achama, hainu lidroma. And similarly, after the sun is the south. So, why do we have to say before the sun and after the sun and to the north and to the south? Aren't those essentially the same thing? Omer Abai, Zokt Abai, Pigimoso, Lifnei Achama, O La'achar Achama. What it means is the Pigimoso, the croissant, as Dennis pointed out. So if the croissant is, sounds very tasty. All right, I'm going to stop joking around. We got to get serious here. If the crescent is like pointing towards the sun, or is it away from the sun? That's what it means. So if he says that the crescent was facing the sun, like the points were like pointing at the sun, so that doesn't work. Because Rabbi Yochanan says, what does the pasuk mean? That the Eibishter, that there's like fear before him, and that is how he makes peace above, so that all the like constellations and stuff do what he wants. That the sun never saw sort of the crescent, like the pointy crescent, banana-y side of the moon, right? That it always sees sort of the round side, the back of the moon. And also the sun has never seen the sort of pointy, what's that called, where they skateboard, half pipey part of the rainbow. So the reason why the sun never sees sort of the half moon, half pipe, banana peel, croissant. Interesting, a croissant kind of looks like a crescent moon. Is that like intentional? I don't know. So, wow. Would you look at that? Huh. So the sun never saw. Interesting. I was just being a nudnik, but in the end, we got a big chiddush over here. So the sun never saw the sort of banana-y, pointy, half moon U thing of the moon, because of the Chol Shadaita, because then the moon will kind of feel bad. I assume the point is because, because the whole, I don't know, I assume the point is like that medrash, like that, like the moon was complaining or something, so they got made smaller, and so maybe like you don't want to highlight that or something. All right, the moon is going to get embarrassed. All right. All right. And also the sun never saw sort of the bow part of the bow. Oh my gosh. Because you don't want the people worship the sun to be able to say, like, you see the sun is shooting arrows, right? If you think about like a bow and arrow, so you hold it when you shoot it, like the U-y, half-pipey, banana-y, croissant-y part, the, dug out U-y, croissant-y part is like, imagine like you're shooting a bow and arrow, and I don't know. So we don't imagine the sun was shooting a bow and arrow in the direction that the bow would look like. So we don't want that, because we don't want anybody to say, you see, we should worship the sun because the sun shoots bows and arrows. We don't want that. Okay, let's move on. Kama haya gavoa. They asked them, well, how high in the sky was the moon, and where was it leaning towards? So we have a brayso that Taka says that if the moon is to the north of the sun, so Taka is telling the truth. He's right. But if it's to the south, then it doesn't work, which is interesting, right? Let's go weiter. We learn in a brayso the opposite. In Taka, our Mishnah, of course, also says the opposite. That davke, if the moon is to the south of the sun, then that means that it's in the new cycle. But to the north, then it doesn't work. So we have two conflicting braysos. One says to the north it works, to the south it doesn't. The other one says afuch. So lokasha, it's no problem. Kan be mosachama, kan be mosageshamim. Depends if it's in the winter or if it's in the summer. Let's see if I could remember. If it's in the summer, so then I think that it's that the sun is like to the south of the moon. And if it's in the winter, then I guess it's like to the north of the moon. I could have gotten that backwards. But basically, it goes back to Gemara that we learned in Eruvin, that like just kind of the way that the sun in like kind of goes around, like from it rises in the east and sets in the west, but it doesn't always go on the same trajectory. I think maybe like the summer it goes like, it's like kind of a southward trajectory, and in the winter it's like a northward trajectory. So just basically like where the moon is kind of relative to the sun is kind of dependent if it's the summer or the winter. So okay, moving on. The rabbis taught, Echad Omer Gavoa Beis Mardos, Echad Omer Gimel. If one of them says that the moon was two goat prods, was that what it was? Goads, cattle goads, in the sky. Echad Omer Shalosh. One says it was 3 cattle goads in the sky. Alright, Edusan Kayemes, so that's acceptable. Echad Omer Gimel, Echad Omer Hey. But if one says it was taka 3 cattle prods, and the other one says it was 5 cattle prods, Edusim Betela, so then it doesn't work. But the witnesses, even though they can't testify together because their testimony is different, however, they could join together with somebody else whose testimony aligns with theirs. Okay? Meaning kilu. So if there was another fellow who said that it was 3 cattle goads in the sky, so then the guy who said 3 can join together and they have a shidduch. If they say, we saw the moon in a reflection in the water or through glass, we saw it through the clouds, it doesn't work. You have to see the moon directly. If you saw half of the moon and you saw it through as a reflection in the water, you saw half the moon and it was through the clouds. You saw half the moon and it was through glass. It doesn't work. Affect the Gemara. I don't understand sort of the direction of the argument. We first start off by saying, even if you see the entire moon, but you saw it through the clouds, for example, it doesn't work. And then we have to point out that if you only see half the moon and it's through the clouds, it doesn't work. Obviously, it doesn't work. Even if you saw the whole moon, it doesn't work if it's through the clouds. Memele, half a moon also wouldn't work. So this is what it means. No, it means that if you saw half of it as a reflection in the water, but half of it actually in the sky. Or again, if you see half of it through the clouds, but half of it you see clearly. Or if you see half of it through glass, but you see half of it clearly. So ein me'idin, still in that case it doesn't work. You have to see the entire moon clearly in the sky. Tana Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Ra'inu v'shuv lo ra'inu. So we saw the moon, and and then we didn't see it for the rest of the night. Ein ma'idin olav, it doesn't work. Kol achi chazula v'azle, to which the Gemara says, I don't understand. What, you have to see the moon and then just keep on looking at it the entire time? If you lose sight of it, also it doesn't work, right? We're saying, if you saw the moon, then you didn't see it again, then you can't trust their testimony. Why not? How long you have to see the moon? They saw the moon. What do you want from them? They saw the moon. But they have to not take their eyes off of it the entire night. Abai says, this is what it means. No, Abai explains what this means is that if they got a glimpse of it, and then holy smokes, we just saw the moon, and then they sort of went to take another look properly, and now they don't see it. So in that case, the glimpse, the initial glimpse that they saw, that they experienced, we cannot trust, because then when they actually went to look at it properly, they didn't find anything. So we can't trust that initial hey, what the heck just happened experience. Did we just see the moon? That we can't trust. My timer. Because we might think that it was just I don't remember. What's Kuvisa de Eva? Can somebody tell me what Kuvisa de Eva? Oh, eagle shall of Lavan. Okay, maybe it was just some kind of white cloud or something that they saw, but it wasn't actually the moon. So that's what it means. But if you saw the moon, and you're sure that you saw the moon, so you don't have to, look at it the entire time. You saw the moon. Says the Mishnah, Rosh Bezdin Omer, the head of the Bezdin says, Mekudosh, that it's a new month. So the new month has been made holy. And then everybody who's there, they respond and they say, Mekudash, Mekudash. So the Rosh Bezdin, the head of the Beit Din, of the judges, says, of the court, says that the month is Mekudash, and then everybody who's there says Mekudash, Mekudash. Ben Shinir Bizmanu, Ben Shalonir Bizmanu, Mekad Shinoso. And when we do this Mekudash, so that's whether it's a Chodesh Mali or a Chodesh Chaser, it doesn't, what is it? Ben Shinir Bizmanu, Ben Shalonir Bizmanu, Mekad Shinoso. So whether it's a Chodesh Chaser, whether it's a Chodesh Mali, the Bezdin says Mekudash. Rabbi Lazar Reb Tzadok, Omer says Rabbi Lazar Reb Tzadok, Im lo nira bizmano, ein mekadshin also, shekvar kitchu shamayim. Says Rabbi Lazar Reb Tzadok, actually, if it's a chodesh male, if it's a 30-day month, so then you don't need to be mekadosh, because memele, it's already kadosh, because you don't have any 31-day months. So when they start, when it's a 29-day month, and on day 30 they say mekudash, so their bezdin is basically saying, okay, it's a new month. They're establishing it as a new month. But once already day 30 passes, and there wasn't and there was no Rosh Chodesh, so on day 31 they don't need to say Mekudesh, because it's already Memele Rosh Chodesh. That's the opinion of Rabbi Lazar Reb Tzadok. Rosh Bezdin v'chulei mino animili. How do we know that we have to be Mekadesh Chodesh? A Bezdin has to say Mekudesh. Amar B'chir Bar Gamdo, Amar Rabbi Yossi ben Shol, Amar Rebbe, Amar Kra, that the pasuk says Veidaber Moshe es Moadei Hashem, that Moshe said the festivals of God, Mikan Rosh Bezdin Omer Mekudash. So I assume the point is that Moshe was the head of all the courts. So if Moshe was Mekadesh the Moados, so then Memele, the head of the Rosh Bezdin, should be Mekadesh, the one to be Mekadesh the Chodesh. Okay? Fine. And then everybody there responds Mekudash, Mekudash, right? So the Rosh Bezdin says Mekudash, and then everybody there responds Mekudash, Mekudash, Minala. How do we know this? So Amar Papa, Amar Kra, Asher Tikru Osam. So it says that they will call them Kribei Atem. So when it says that Elam Adei Hashem Mikrai Kodesh, these are the festivals of God, Asher Tikru Osam, that you will call them Kribei Atem, that you will call it out. Okay? It says that these are my festivals. Haim Yomer Moadei Kodesh. Moadai. They will say, the people there will say that they are my festivals. Mekudesh, Mekudesh, Zimnei Lamali. How come we have to say Mekudesh twice? Because it says the callings out, plural, of holiness. So therefore they say Mekudash twice. Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadik Omer, Lo Niras B'Zmanu Mekadshino. So says Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadik that if it's a Chodesh Mole, if it's a 30-day month, so then you don't need to say Mekudesh on day 31 to say that it's the first day of the next month, because Memele, if it wasn't a 29-day month, Memele was a 30-day month, so you don't have to say Mekudesh, it's Memele already Mekudesh. Tanya, we're doing a Baisa, Plimo Omer, says Plimo. Bizmanu ein Mekadshin oso, Shelo Bizmanu Mekadshin oso. Oh, so Plimo says Punkt Vakert. He says the opposite of Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadik. He says that Bizmanu ein Mekadshin oso. In a Chodesh Choser, in a 29-day month, you don't say Mekudesh. Shelo Bizmanu Mekadshin oso, but if it's a 30-day month, that is when you say Mekudesh. Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon Omer says, Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, Ben kach uven kach ein mekadshin oso. Whether it says Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, and we have seen this before. Where do we see it? Who could tell me where we saw this? I don't know. Where do we see this, Lamaisa? Do we have any? I don't know. We saw this before though. What's this? Hey, and Daf Ches. So we saw the opinion of Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon that they're not mekadesh any of the months, right? Bezin doesn't say mekudesh on any of the months. Right? Benkach uvenkach, so whether it's a chodesh mali, whether it's a chodesh chaser, they don't say mekudesh. Shenemar, as the pasuk says in the context of Yovel, b'kidashtim eshnas chamishim shanim, that you will make kadosh, that they will say mekudesh on the 50th year on Yovel. Shanim ata mekadesh v'ata mekadesh chodashim. You mekadesh years, you mekadesh the Yovel year, but you're not mekadesh just individual months to say mekudesh. No matter if it's 29 days or 30 days. Amr Yehuda Amr Shmuel says Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadik, that the halacha is taka like Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadik, that you say that Bezdin says mekudesh on a chodesh chaser, but not on a chodesh male. Amr Abaye says Abaye af ananami tanina, we taka learn in a Mishnah that what does the Mishnah say on Daf Chafei Omid Beis, Ra'u Bezdin v'chol Yisrael, that if Bezdin and all of the Yidden saw the moon, Kilu, it's clear that it was a new moon. Right? Bezdin and all the Yidden saw the new moon. Nechru ha'edim, and the witnesses were already questioned. However, they did not manage to say Mekudash before it got dark. So Kilu, it was day 30. Everyone saw the moon. Mamish, everyone saw the moon. Everyone knew that it was a new moon. And it was day 30. And they were witnesses, and they checked the witnesses, but they just didn't manage to say Mekudesh before it got dark, and now it's dark, and they didn't say Mekudesh on day 30. Harezeh Me'uber, so guess what? It's nonetheless a Chodesh Maleh. Even though everybody saw the moon, and everyone knew, it was common knowledge, okay, Memele, today should be Rosh Chodesh, but they didn't say Mekudesh, so therefore Memele, the next day is going to be a Me'uber, is going to be a Chodesh Maleh, a 30-day month. Me'uber in, Mekudesh lo. And we say, Harez and Me'uber, right? If they didn't manage to say Mekudesh before the nightfall, so then it's Me'uber. And we want to say Me'uber in, Mekudesh lo. That it's Me'uber, that Memele becomes a 30-day month. However, they're not Mekadesh it per se. How come? Because it's like Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadik, that you're only Mekadesh when it's a 30-day month, and when it's a 29-day month, not when it's a 30-day month. Me'uber, it's Trichale, to which the Gemara answers, not necessarily. It could be that they're Mekadesh, even when it's a 30-day month as well. Though just the only reason why we mention Me'uber as opposed to Mekudesh is because it's Trichale, because we needed to teach Sakadate Chamina. I may have thought to say, Bezdin v'chol Yisrael ifarsim of lola abrua kamash malon. I may have thought to say, well, since everyone saw it, Bezdin, all the Yidden, maybe I would think to say, well, even though they didn't manage to say Mekudesh on day 30, but it was public, everybody saw that it was already a new moon, so maybe in that case it wouldn't be Me'uber, it would be a Chodesh Chaser. So therefore we had to say Me'uber to say that no, since they didn't say Mekudesh on day 30, so Memele, Rosh Chodesh is the next day on day 31, and it's a Chodesh Maleh, even though everybody saw it, but that's why we focused on Me'uber to say that it's a Chodesh Maleh, even in that case. But still they would say Mekudesh. You could argue at least that still they would say Mekudesh on the next day. So it's not necessarily a proof for Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzaddik, but nonetheless, Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel says that the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzaddik, that you wear Mekadesh a 29-day month, but not a 30-day month. Okay, friends, now we get to a new Mishnah, last Mishnah of the day. Let's make it a good one. Rabbi Gamliel had the images of the moon in a chart and on the wall. All right, sounds nice. Or a tablet and on the wall. So, and then he would, so when the people would come to testify about the new moon, and he was trying to understand what they saw, so he would ask them, and he would point at the tablet, and he would say, hey, did the moon look like this, or did it look like this? And he would have diagrams there in order, so when he's trying to understand from the witnesses what exactly they saw. Says the Gemara, Umishari, the Gemara wants to know, are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to make sort of, what's the word? Like, I guess images, but like structures, shapes, forms. Are you allowed to make forms of the moon? But the Pasuk says, Lo saisun iti, Lo saisun kidmu shamoshai. That the Pasuk says, do not make with me gods of silver and gold. So, right, so it says, Lo saisun iti, Lo saisun kidmu shamoshai. Don't make anything like those that serve me. And the moon is part of the shamoshim, the servants of God, I guess part of the celestial spheres. And you shouldn't be making images of the moon, forms of the moon. So it says Abaye that no, what that means is don't make any of like the servants of, or the things that are used to serve God that you can actually replicate. So, right? So for example, we're about to see some examples of like, you shouldn't make replicas of the klei sharis from the Beis Hamikdash, because those you can actually use. You build a menorah, you can use it to light up your, maybe I can use a menorah over here, but hakoponim. So you can actually use that. What are you going to do with the replica of the moon? So therefore, so you can answer that by saying no. There's no problem with making a form of the moon, because the moon is not something that you can't replicate a planet, like practically speaking. Like for example, a menorah that was used in the service of the Beis Hamikdash, you could replicate that and use it and get light. So therefore, you're not allowed to do that. But the moon, you can make forms of the moon. There's no harm in that. Kidatanya, as we learn in the Brisa, Lo yaisa adam bayis tavnes heichel. A fellow shouldn't make for himself a house that looks like the heichel of the Beis Hamikdash, the sanctuary. Achsadja tavnes ulam. You shouldn't make some kind of a portico or something that looks like the ulam, the antechamber of the Beis Hamikdash. Chotzer k'neged azar, you shouldn't make a courtyard that looks like the azara of the Beis Hamikdash. Shulchan k'neged shulchan, don't make a table that looks like the shulchan in the Beis Hamikdash. Menorah k'neged menorah, don't make a menorah that looks like the menorah from the Beis Hamikdash. Aval, but osa shachamisha v'shel shisha v'shel shmona. Now, the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash had 7 sort of, what are they called? Like cups, I guess, like branches. Right? The menorah in the Beis Hamikdash had 7 branches. So we're saying don't make a menorah with 7 branches, but you can make a menorah of 5 branches. V'shel shisha, you can make a menorah of 6 branches. V'shel shmona, or 8 branches. V'shel shiva lo yaiseh, but not a menorah of 7 branches, because that's the way it was in the Beis Hamikdash. Afilu shel shar mine matechos, and even if you make it out of different kinds of metals, it's still not okay. Don't make a 7-branched menorah. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Omer af shel eitz lo yaiseh. Says Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, you even shouldn't make a menorah out of wood. Like the Chashmonaim kings did, they made a menorah out of wood. So don't make a menorah out of wood. Amrlo, they said to Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, Misham Raya, you seriously bringing a proof from the menorah of the Chashmonaim that from there you shouldn't be making a menorah of wood. Shvudin shal ba'arzal ayu, v'chipum bebatz. The menorah of the Chashmonaim, it was taka made out of iron, and they covered it in tin. They covered it in tin. I have a cousin. He's a very good guy, and he was in the aluminum business, I think. And I think he used to like to point out, it's not tin foil, it's aluminum foil. You know, it's they call it aluminium. Aluminium. Let's go weiter. Hashir asaum shel kesef. So they started out with a menorah that was made out of iron, and they covered it in tin. And then they got wealthier, and then they made the menorah out of silver. Chazu ashiru asaum shel zav, and they got wealthier as well, even more wealthier. And then they were able to afford to make the menorah then out of gold. Okay, fine. Very nice. So what do we see from there? So we see that you shouldn't be making replicas of things that are usable, such as the kelim of the Beis HaMikdash. But we want to argue that you could make a replica of the moon, because the moon, you can make a replica of the moon, it still isn't functional as a moon. But wait a second. Just because you can't make a real life implementation of something doesn't mean that it's permitted, right? You can't actually make a real replica, usable replica of the moon, but that does not mean that you can make forms of the moon. Don't make with me. Don't make the forms of those that serve me. That serve before me in the sky, in the heavens, above. So wouldn't that be a reference to the moon? Don't even make a form of the moon. Abaye says, so Abaye says, that when it says that don't make like the Dmush Shamosha and Shamshim Lefanai Bamarum, don't make like my servants who serve me above, that's referring to the Chayos HaKodesh, to the holy Chayos, that they had four faces. The face of a human face, the face of a lion face, the face of an ox face, and the face of an eagle. Alright? So don't do that. Don't make the forms of the Chayos HaKodesh with their four faces. But one second, so that would imply that, but you can make the form of a human face. But what about the Brisa that says, you're allowed to make whatever faces you want, just not the face of a man. So Abaye wanted to say that what that pasuk means is don't make the four faces of the Chayos HaKodesh. However, that would imply that you're allowed to make the face of man, but we have a Brisa that says you're not allowed to make the face of man. Rafuna Breder of Idi, Mipiked Abaye, Shmieli, says Rafuna Breder of Idi that he heard taka from the teachings of Abaye, from the Shiurim of Abaye. Lo Saisun Iti, don't make with me. Lo Saisun Osi, don't make Osi, right? Don't make me, and that's a reference to like human face. I guess like man was created in the image of God, I guess. So okay, we have a pasuk also that says, we can learn out from the pasuk as well, that don't make sort of a face of me. Like don't make faces. Don't make faces. Don't make faces. Alright, don't make faces. Don't make faces. Okay, but making a form of the moon would be okay. Speaking of faces, my mom just called me to tell me that on one of the episodes in Babel of Talmud, she was watching, my hair didn't look good. Well, let me tell you, what do you guys think? I'm not getting a haircut, so you don't really have much of a choice. Well, I would get a haircut, but it takes too long. Let's go weiter. Fine. Lamaisa, there are other things I have to do before I get a haircut. Things that I want to do. I even tried to do it. Alright, we gotta go weiter. Yeah. We gotta go weiter. Alright. Fine. Vishar Shamoshin mi shari. So one second. So are we still trying to argue that you're allowed to make the forms of the other servants? V'atana, we talk on a brisa. Lo saisun iti, don't make with me. Lo saisun kidmush shamoshem shamshim lefane b'maram. Don't make the images of those that serve before me above. But now we're getting more specific. Kigon, for example, ofanim, the strafim, the chayos hakodesh, u'malachi ashares. So we see that Take, all of these like angels and ministering beings that are above, you're not allowed to replicate. And therefore the implication that we want to say is that also you would not be allowed to replicate the moon. What the pasuk is saying is that you're not allowed to replicate the sort of these servants in the upper kind of echelons of upper heavenly society, I guess. But like the moon is kind of lower down. Alright? What does Rashi say? Does Rashi say something about like, what does Rashi say? Mother Elyon Barakia Shvi'i, in the seventh heaven. Tidakinon iti aval chamu levon v'kochav mazos mother atachton in Barakia Asheni. But like the sun and the moon and stuff, they and the stars and the constellations, they're in the second heaven. So you can replicate those. Okay. Mishav mother hatachton mishari. But one second. But are you allowed to make replicas of the what are they called? Not like constellations, but the moons and stuff that are in the lower mother in like the second heaven. We learn in the Brisa Asher b'shamayim that when the pasuk says that are in heaven, the Rabbos Chama Levana Kochav Mazalus, that includes the sun and the moon, the stars and the constellations. Mimal above the Rabbos Malachi Asharis, that comes to include Malachi Asharis. So now we have a brisa that's specifically singling out, among other things, but specifically mentioning the moon. So, and for the Gemara Kitanya Ha'ila Ovdam, what it's saying is don't worship them, but you can make their form of the moon. Ilavdam afilu shulshul ka'in nami. For one second, if we're talking about that you're just not allowed to serve those celestial beings, is that what I was looking for maybe? But you can't even serve a little worm. I mean, what's the chiddush of these celestial beings? Well, Enochinami. The Gemara says, yeah, you're right. You're not allowed to worship a worm either. The Tanya is within the Brisa, Asher ba'aretz, that are on the ground, l'rabos har mugvos, to include mountains and hills, yom naharos, seas and rivers, afikum v'ge'ayos, streams and valleys, mitachas below, the Rabbos shel shukayin, to include even small little worms. So you're not allowed to worship worms and hills and mountains and the moon, but we want to say that you'd be allowed to make the form of the moon. But one second, can you just make the form of the moon? Don't make with me. Don't make like the form of those that serve before me. Kigon, for example, don't make the form of the sun, the moon, the stars, and the constellations. So we see, don't make the form of the moon. Boom. To which the Gemara says, alright, you got me in a corner. You're not allowed to make the form of the moon. So what's the deal with Rabbi Gamliel? Rabbi Gamliel didn't make it. Other people, Gentile people, made these forms of the moon for Rabbi Gamliel. And he was using those, but he didn't make them himself. But one second, Rav Yehuda had a certain ring, and on this ring was a stamp. And there was a stamp of like a face of a fellow or something. And other people made it for him. So here we have Rav Yehuda. He's got some kind of a form that you're not allowed to make, but other people made it for him. He didn't make it himself. And Shmuel says to Rav Yehuda, Nu Janine, what does he say? Shinana. He calls him the sharp one. Sami Eine Didain. Poke out the eye of this seal, of this face on the seal, i.e., ruin it, because we don't want anybody to think. So, let's leave it for that for a second. So, what do we see? So we see that Rav Yehuda had this ring with a form of a human face, and even though other people made it for him, right, non-Jewish people made it for him, still Shmuel was saying that you better get rid of it. So why was Rabbi Gamliel allowed to have these moons? So the Gemara says, well, when it comes to Rav Yehuda, his ring was protruding, right? The face was protruding from the ring, and therefore mishum chashada, we didn't want that anybody should think chas v'shalom that Rav Yehuda made this tzura on the ring, so therefore Shmuel was saying not to do it. Tanya is willing in a bright not to wear it. Tanya is willing in a bright, or at least to ruin it. Tabas chosama bolet osur lanicha, that if you have a ring and its seal is sort of protruding from it, so you're not allowed to wear it. But umutur lachton ba, but you can use it as a seal, because when you press it against something, it'll make an indentation in that other thing, and that's permitted. Right? The problem is making something protruding, but something indenting would be okay. So you can't wear it because it's protruding from the ring, but you can use it as a seal, as a stamp, because whatever you stamp is going to be intruded as opposed to protruded. Okay? Now, if the opposite is true, that the ring is inverted, so you're allowed to wear it, but you're not allowed to seal it, to like stamp it on something, because then the thing that you're stamping is going to be protruding. Okay? But one second. Is it really true that we're concerned about like the yentis? That meaning, we're saying that Rabbi Yehuda was not allowed to, Shmuel didn't want Rabbi Yehuda to wear this ring because the image of a face was protruding, and we didn't want the yentis to say, oh look, Rabbi Yehuda's doing avodah zarah. But do we really have to be concerned about that? There was a certain synagogue in Arda that was called the Shaf v'Yosef synagogue. That Darton, there was like a statue of the king. And Rav and Shmuel, Avodah Shmuel and Levi, they would all frequent this synagogue, even though there was this sort of statue of the king over there. And the Takadavan over there. They weren't concerned that anybody would think that they're like bowing down to a Getchka or something. So, and for the Gemara, Rabim Shiny. Well, that was different because it was in public. Because it was in public, so that's why it was okay. But one second, Rabbi Gamliel was just an individual fellow. So why was he allowed to have these forms of the moon? So so one way to answer it is, well, even though he's an individual, but he's a public figure, so there's always people by him, so therefore it's considered more sort of public. Or if you want, I will say the prakim hava, it was the form of the moon was made up in different pieces, and I guess that makes it okay. Or you could say, well, Gamliel really just had it. Why did he have these forms of the moon? As a teaching method. People come to testify about the moon, and he's doing it so that he could learn more about what exactly they saw. He could point at it and say, did it look like this? Did it look like that? So it was for learning purposes. And the Pasuk says, don't learn to do like the Ovdei Kochavim, Avalat Lamed, Lavun Lahorus. You can learn in order to understand and to teach about it, but don't learn in order to be able to do avodah zarah. That's not what you want. So we're saying over here as well, Gamliel was allowed to have these forms of the moon since they were for educational, teaching purposes, so that people can give proper testimony. Friends, that was Daf Chav Daled of Masechta Rosh Hashanah. The Daf began kind of understanding before the moon and after the moon, kind of a technical discussion based on what time of year it is and where the sun is relative to the moon. Really, how the moon sort of traverses the earth. Okay, very good. Or really, I think how the sun traverses the earth, and then what the implications are for the moon. Was that what it was? No, I'm forgetting Taka. Maybe it was Taka the moon. Oh no, so I think it's talking about the sun and how the moon is relative to the sun. Okay, fine. And then we talk about different sort of situations where people's testimony sort of didn't add up, and what we weren't, that we can't use it. Then we discussed how Bezdin says then Mekudash, right? When Rosh Chodesh is ready, when it's time for Rosh Chodesh, so then Bezdin says Mekudash, and whoever is there says Mekudash, Mekudash. And we saw different versions of when exactly we're Mekadesh the Chodesh. The Tanna Kama says we're Mekadesh the Chodesh always, whether it's a Chodesh Chaser, whether it's a Chodesh Male. When it's Rosh Chodesh, they say Mekudash. Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzadok says no, they only say Mekudash on a Chodesh Chaser. But on a Chodesh Male, they would not say Mekudash. Plimo Taka says the opposite. Then a Chodesh Chaser, they don't say Mekudash. On a Chodesh Male, they Taka do say Mekudash. And Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, says that actually you don't say Mekudash ever. Right? Whether it's a Chodesh Male, whether it's a Chodesh Chaser, you do not say Mekudash, because only we're Mekadesh years, not months. We're Mekadesh Yovel, but not the months of the year, says Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, that the halacha is like Rabbi Elazar, Reb Tzadok. Then we saw this new Mishnah that Rabbi Gamliel had forms of the moon, and he would ask people, did it look like this, did it look like that? And we got into a whole arichos about, are you actually allowed to make forms of the moon? So Pashtus seems to be, no, you shouldn't really make forms of the moon. You shouldn't really make forms of the moon. The reason why Rabbi Gamliel was allowed to have it, we gave 3 reasons why maybe he was allowed to have it. One was because, he was in public, right? People were always coming in. He was the Nasi, he was a public figure. People were always around, so it's considered more public. And we saw just like Rav and Shmuel and Avodah Shmuel and Levi, they would daven in the synagogue that had sort of a statue of the king, and that was okay because it's in a public area. So also Rabbi Gamliel was considered kind of a public figure and a public personality, so it's considered public. The other option was that the moon was actually made up of little pieces. And finally, the moon was for educational purposes. And maybe because it was for educational purposes, that's why it was okay. Friends, that was Daf Chaf Daled of Masechta Rosh Hashanah. Of course, I hope you enjoyed, and of course, I hope you enjoy your day. Cheers.